Welcome to Trailblazers and Titans with your host, Dr. Keith Haney. Trailblazers and Titans is your go-to podcast for insights, inspiration, and actionable advice from the world's most successful entrepreneurs and leaders. Each episode features in-depth interviews with industry pioneers, innovative thinkers, and business moguls who share their journeys, challenges, and strategies for success. Whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur, a seasoned leader, or someone looking to make a significant impact, this podcast provides the tools and motivation to blaze your trail and become a titan in your field. Tune in to learn, grow, and transform your vision into reality.
My guest today is Todd Holzman, former leadership coach at IBM's top executive, head of organizational development at Honeywell, and fellow at McKinsey's Change Center. Todd has taught world leaders at Harvard Kennedy School of Government, developed doctoral students at Columbia University, and trained tens of thousands of leaders globally to get to candor. We welcome Todd to the podcast. Well, Todd, welcome to the podcast. How you doing today?
I'm great. Dr. Reverend.
There you go. It's good
Keith
to have you on.
Haney. Nice to see you, sir. Thank you for having me.
Good to see you too. Looking forward to this conversation. So I love to start out with getting to know my guest by kind of giving me the best piece of advice you've ever received.
What's the best piece of advice I ever received? For some reason, the worst piece of advice came into my mind.
I thought about that question too, actually.
But my father, on his advice on how to treat women at a young age. So let's not go there. The best piece of advice I've ever received. I would say listen to your heart.
I like that. And how has that served you well in your kind of making your decisions in terms of even business and just life in general?
Yeah, and it's a bigger part of the idea of listening. Do you know that movie Love Actually?
Yes,
it's one of my favorite movies, and I watch it. May have skipped last Christmas, but I watch it every Christmas. And there's this beautiful, narration from Hugh Grant at the beginning of the movie where you see people reuniting with their friends and family at Heathrow Airport in London. And the comment he makes is that, love is all around us. If only, you know where to look or something like that. And I think the truth is that there's always things to be learned every day. Kind of learning and lessons are all around us. And I think it's about listening to yourself and really listening to other people. Because I think we're all kind of conduits for the infinite, and you never know when from whom and when some useful nugget is going to come. And so, but also for me, I think listening to my heart has been very important because, I went through all these, I'm grateful for all these fancy schools, and they certainly taught me a lot about how to think and how to articulate myself. But there's more to being a good leader in the world and helping people than this. And I think tuning into your heart and what your small voice inside of you is saying, that has been really important to me, I would say, more than anything in the last 8 years. And more often than not, I think when I follow what the voice inside of me is saying, things end up ultimately going well. And when I disconnect from it because I'm just working really hard, I'm doing one thing after another, I'm creating no space for listening and tuning in, I just become a ragged machine that can get a lot of stuff done, but sometimes will lose my way. I think that's the truth.
No, that's very profound. I love that. Will you delve into that, because that has really become the hallmark of today's coaching, is how do you create empathetic leaders that are sensitive to the teams that they're leading. If you just lead with your head and you only lead with the results in mind, you leave people behind in the conversation.
But you still have to use your head to reconcile it all. Like, okay, something's bothering me. Why is it bothering me? Is it okay? This conversation I had during this meeting, is a reflection of my own spoiledness, or is it, which it can be, right? Because just like everybody else, I can get full of myself. Is it a reflection of there actually is something that needs to be said, and there's an issue that isn't being dealt with and needs to be dealt with, and trying to sort all that out. You still need IQ and EQ. It's the combination of these two things that's I think so important. Because 8 years ago, I was a managing director at another firm. I started my own firm, and the key to that being as successful as it's become, we've trained tens of thousands of leaders in the last 8 years. I've developed a 13-person global faculty, most of whom are not in the States. They're in the UK and Europe. I think a lot of it's down to kind of listening more than anything.
Yeah, I love that. So you kind of gave us a little bit of your journey. What led you into leadership coaching? Because that is a unique space to be in. What led you to do that?
I would say probably maybe indirectly my father, who passed away over the summer.
Sorry to hear that.
And thank you. And I think what he instilled with me is that, first of all, is a kind of hopeful optimism that things can always be better. And also that you have to fight for that as a person. Because my father was really a fighter, sometimes to his detriment. But and so when so I've always kind of had this feeling that like an individual can actually make a real difference, and whether they are a kind of leader in title or they're not. And I think that's why I resonated so much with the professors that I studied with and got to teach with at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard, Ron Heifetz and Dean Williams, because the way they think about leadership, and this is an important nuance about being a leadership coach, is that leadership is everyone's right and responsibility. That we all have the right to and are responsible for making things better within the scope of our authority, but beyond it when nobody looks to us as the leader, or no one's looking to us for guidance, answers, or any of that. And so I like this notion of that you don't have to be an authority figure to be a leader. Of course, oftentimes lots of authority figures aren't leaders, and you see lots of good leadership from people who aren't authority figures. And so I guess this notion that probably came from my father of that individuals can make a difference and make things better in the world. And when I equated that with leadership in my mind, maybe want to do something around that. And I wanted to do something around that because I wanted my life to mean something. I wanted my life to matter. I didn't want to have a job and just make money. Maybe life would have been easier had I chosen that. I don't know. Probably not. Probably would have come with a lot of liabilities along the way. So yeah, that's why. And so that's all that I've studied, a couple of master's degrees. And, I shied away from the PhD twice, got admitted twice to Columbia for the PhD, or one EDD and one PhD, and turned it down both times. So they'll never allow me to apply ever again, and I honestly don't blame them. Yeah, so that's been my life's work about trying to figure out how to try to inspire and equip people to step up to the call of leadership and to be able to deliver it when it counts.
As you think about your career, were there key people in your life, mentors or just people of influence, who helped shape your approach to leadership?
Yeah, of course. The two gentlemen that I mentioned, Dr. Victoria Marsick from Columbia University has been a friend and mentor to me since 1994. Certainly Al Preble, Stacy Shively, Brent Heimer from Cambridge Leadership. The person who probably had the biggest effect on me is a guy who's been passed away for a while now. A guy named Chris Argyris, Argyris. Probably the most brilliant person in the field of leadership and organization development that has ever walked the planet. I think the stats on him were, but he taught at the Harvard Business School, the Harvard Graduate School of Education, the Harvard Law School, and I think the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. So no one's ever taught at 4 schools there, let alone, barely one, right? That's number one. Number two, he wrote well over 100 articles. I forget the amount, maybe like 140 or something, 30 books, and received 14 honorary doctorates for his massive contributions to leadership, research, social sciences, the field of education. He was a real loser. I mean, he's such an impressive human being. And I had the chance to talk to him on several occasions. And all the work and research that I've done is grounded in the foundational work that he did. In fact, the reason I turned down the first PhD is because I got waitlisted. So I got waitlisted to do my PhD in social organizational psychology from Columbia University Teachers College, where I had done my master's in social organizational psychology. It's one of these things where like 5,000 applications, 5 people get in. I was waitlisted. I'm like, you waitlisted me? Come on. And in the midst of that, in Victoria Marsick's class, I started reading Chris Argyris's books and papers and articles. And it was like a real awakening for me. And so that work ruined my life, and I became committed to, I want to equip people to lead better in the world, but I also want to create actionable knowledge that will help people do so. And I didn't feel at the time that PhD program would allow me to do either of those things, which is why I turned it down. And one of his, I think, incredibly important discoveries, there are people who are listening may be vaguely familiar with some of his work. If you've heard of the ladder of influence, ideas like balance, advocacy, and inquiry, single and double learning, yada, yada. These are the things that he popularized, he's known for. But his most important discovery is what my field, the field of leadership development, realized and said, we're not even looking at that, or just promptly forgot, or a bunch of people don't even know about anymore. It's almost like if Einstein came up with equals MC squared and they go, nah, not interested, if you were a physicist. And this is what's happened in my field. So what he discovered in the early 70s is that we have 2 kinds of theories. We have our espoused theories and our theories in use. Our espoused theory contains all of the ways we want to behave and what we truly believe. You could call that, and usually it's a representation of what we deem to be the good. And it's very important to have good espoused theories. It's very good in your mind to have a sense of what good looks like and all of that. And so preaching, normal teaching, that's more I talk, you listen, YouTube videos, the good stuff makes our espoused theories better and more complete. Then you have the theory in use, is the almost an algorithmic program that determines how we really behave under real life pressure. And some interesting discoveries about these things. Number one, there's quite a commonality around people's espoused theories. So if you ask people questions like, how important as a leader is it for you to be courageous, to be curious, to be collaborative, to be compassionate? Hands, 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 hands. Everybody kind of agrees with that. And they agree with this across cultures, by the way. Very interesting. But if you look at people under real life pressure, which is when their theory and use kicks in, people default to behaving in ways which block them from behaving according to their espoused theories. They're largely blind to it. And the default pattern of behavior is also seemingly universal across all kinds of people, culture, company, country, etc. And it's a really interesting thing, which is why in my field, leadership training usually doesn't stick, because all these great things are affecting people's espoused theories, but this unconscious protective program, which gets activated when people go to behave with other human beings, gets activated. And so people behave in ways that are contradictory to the way they believe they ought to behave. And it creates a blindness to that fact. So as an example, I'll give a quick example here. So, you got a leader who says, it's really important to give my person honest feedback, right? Because they've got some blind spots around their gaps. And if I don't tell them, then there's no chance of them improving. And then they're going to fall behind. Okay, so the leader believes that. Then you look at them in action, and they ask a bunch of questions and never tell the person what they think the gap is. So you could say, that leader's simply a hypocrite, right? They say one thing, they do another. But Chris's, I think, more accurate and kind explanation was the person really believes that, but something happens to them in the action moment that explains why they're behaving differently. And the reason they're asking questions might be, yes, I believe in honest feedback, but I also am wired to keep things comfortable, both for myself and or others. And this overprotectiveness ends up trumping my higher desires. Did the line get screwed up? You're a little bit fuzzy right now. It might be my fault.
You're good.
As long as I look good, this is the important thing, Reverend. As we all know here, everybody knows how handsome you are, so we don't have to bore them with that. So that was a very interesting, I think, finding and discovery, and that we all tend to default to this overprotectiveness. And so when we most need to be courageous, which certainly giving somebody honest feedback, I think it takes some courage, because you don't know exactly how they're going to respond. And so you're kind of stepping into the unknown. We tend to keep things too comfortable. When we need to be curious, like this listening thing I was telling you about, we're often too controlling and trying to dominate the conversation. When we need to be more collaborative, we're too competitive. We want to be right and not wrong. We want to kind of look good, not bad. We want to win the conversation and not lose. And when we most need to bring compassion to the conversation, sometimes is when we're the most condemning, because people don't think the way we think they ought to think or behave the way we ought to think they should, and therefore we just start blaming them. And so we have these two sides of our nature which stand side by side. And apparently these different theories are stored in different parts of people's brains. And so that discovery and having a disturbing experience of that in myself during a class at Columbia, where I said, wow, I espouse X and I do Y, and it's creating all kinds of freaking problems. It was kind of a road to Damascus moment for me, as my British friends would say. Um, and and it was Chris's discovery, and I said, okay, I'm going to dedicate my life to a trying to improve people's espoused theories, because if we don't have a sense of what good looks like when it comes to leadership, then we can't help people. But B, to make sure this overprotective program doesn't block people from behaving both more competently, but in ways that are more aligned with their higher values. And that's what I've spent my life on since 1994.
Is that why people like tests like Myers-Briggs really trying to test toward this is who you are under stress? So be that leader under stress versus the espoused leader who this is who you aspirationally want to be, but you're going to operate more in this realm. So do we just kind of try to lead people in the realm they naturally default to versus trying to help them be more the leader that they desire to be?
So are you asking, there might be more than one question to what you asked.
It is probably.
No, I want to clarify, because I want to make sure I respond in a way that's connected. Are you asking what the intent of something like Myers-Briggs is? And or are you asking, are we trying to help people? Are we trying to recognize people for who they are and say, that's cool? Or are we trying to cast a bright light on the gap between who they need to be and would like to be versus how they show up?
Yeah, I guess
all of the above.
Kind of all of the above. I kind of get the sense that some people approach leadership like, okay, this is who you're going to be under stress. Let's just deal with that and not even get you to where you aspirationally want to be. And so we just live in that realm versus there are other people who say, let's bridge the gap and get you there. And I don't know, I haven't really seen people try to, I shouldn't say that. I don't know how I've successfully seen people teach you how to lead to get you where you want to be more than just deal with who you are, live in that realm, be the best you can be, as opposed to let's get to where you want to be as an aspirational leader.
Okay, that's a great question. So I'll tap on Myers-Briggs lightly for a second. So I think certainly the intent of things like Myers-Briggs is to help people become more aware of who they really are and why they behave in the ways that they do. Caveat, Myers-Briggs is not psychometrically valid. Okay? And there's a whole history to it. I won't get into it now, but people love it. And it doesn't mean people can't get something from it, because anything that forces you to reflect on yourself generally is going to produce something good. But I also don't want to test people with something that's not psychometrically valid, and then they buy what this is saying about them, and it ain't true. Okay? So as far as I understand from the clinical psychologists that I follow, the Big 5 personality test, I'm not like a big personality test guy. Okay, so this is not I don't have a real dog in this fight, but Big 5 personality test is psychometrically valid, and the Hogan profile, which is in part based upon that, is also psychometrically valid. So those out there who are very interested in personality tests, at least choose something valid, and you can get like a very cheap version if you look up the Big 5 and on Jordan Peterson's website. He has something that's like super cheap and it's worth doing. And I did it and I found it very insightful. And then I bought things for my friends and family, and they were very disappointed I didn't buy them something nicer than a personality test for Christmas, but fine. So let's park that. Now, so the mostly explicit question you were asking is really interesting. So is our job as coaches to simply affirm who leaders are, or is it to call them to something better? Absolutely B and A, right? And because you have books like, from late 90s, early 2000s, recognize your strengths and stop working on your weaknesses. There's something to it. Like, don't be unrealistic about who you are. And maybe you're trying to force yourself, you're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. And you got to learn Am I a square peg or am I a round peg? So I do think there's a lot of value in that and just getting real about yourself. So I think that I do agree with that. But also, you're good enough just the way you are. None of us are good enough the way we are. I mean, we are and we're not, right? God will love all of us, warts included, right? And you know if you really love somebody, you even love the things that are annoying about them. Not all the time, but sometimes. Or you might find even some of those things endearing, which are not endearing to other people. Fine. But man, this life is bigger than anybody. We're all living at just above snorkel depth. Some of us below snorkel depth. So that may mean that there's some adaptation that's required, some growth that's required. Number one. Number two, what a pessimistic view of human nature. You're good enough the way you are. You have no idea how good you can be and how great you are. So I want to affirm people, but I don't want to tell them, I don't want to implicitly tell them there ain't more to you than you see, because that's not true. And I'm not God, and I can't determine that for you. So, and I also believe that there's so much more in most people than we see and maybe even they realize. I mean, how many people have found themselves in difficult circumstances and something comes out of them they had no idea was there? So that's kind of my response to that. Now, I'm certainly as a coach not going to try to impose that on any of them, but I can say, okay, well, I think the situation requires you to behave in these ways. Do you agree with that? Your choice. Yes. Okay, well, it looks like you're behaving in these other ways. Here's why I say that. Here's my data. Do you agree with that? Yes. All right, we got a gap. So I think the consequence of the gap are X, Y, and Z for you and the people around you and for all the stuff you care about. Do you agree with that? Yeah. Okay. Do you want to do something about it? No. Okay. At least you've made an informed choice and I helped you make a choice that was yours. I will not play God with you, but I won't shy away from sharing with you the gap between who maybe you aspire to be or who the situation seemingly requires you to be and how you're showing up. Because what good would I be as a coach? You know, because then what do we become as a coach? Remember that you and I are both old enough to remember this. Saturday Night Live, what was it? Guy Smiley, we look in the mirror.
Oh yeah.
You know, you're good enough, and gosh darn, people like you. That whole thing.
Right.
Like, no, that's not our role, man. Not our role at all. It's an act of love to help people recognize the gaps between their aspirations and how they're showing up. That's how we serve people. That's a big part of how we serve people, I think.
I love that because that explains kind of the goal of what you're doing as coaching is to try to bridge that gap. And you're right. You need someone to be a truth teller to you, to say, you know, here's what I see, here's what you could achieve. So how do we help get you from there to there? And I've done some coaching myself. I know the thing is you have to ask the question, are you willing to do the work to get there? Or
right.
If not, then thank you for coming. You know, like
Yeah.
pay at the door on the way out, right?
Make sure you leave your tithing, but that's fine.
Right.
You know, yes, but there's also this. I'm sorry, were you going to say something else?
No, that was
before
it.
I jump in.
No,
I think that's right. But also I think as a coach, I mean, it's important for me to have, you know, humility. And that's hard. It's all hard, man. It's all hard to express the truth of what you think to a leader that you're the coach of. It's also hard to be wrong about it, you know, as well, because just because I'm the coach or I'm the leadership development person, this large group of people, doesn't mean that I'm right. So I remember, so when IBM hired me at the age of 29 or 30 to be a coach to a segment of their top 30 executives, this was probably the worst mishire in history. I mean, who does that? Really? I'm like 30 years old at the time. I mean, these guys were in their 50s. They would forget more about leadership than I had learned at that point in my life. I think that's actually true. But because I went to Harvard and I had spent some time at McKinsey, they think I know something. I didn't know. Can I curse?
Sure.
I didn't know shit from Shinola, okay, is the old expression my father used to say, right? But I had something that a lot of people couldn't give to them. Some of these discoveries I had from Argyris, and it was like, and the ability to help them have a much better conversation than they otherwise would be able to have about things that were very meaningful with customers, with their boss, with their colleagues, with people on their team, all of it, right? But I remember I was coaching Steve Ward, who was the head of the $13 or $15 billion industrial sector. I mean, it's just like a god. He became the first person when IBM sold its laptop. Remember, they have ThinkPads. Back to your earlier IBM joke to me, which was before the call. Apparently, I couldn't know what is it? I didn't know how to start the podcast. I hit the button, start podcast. And then the lovely Reverend here said, didn't you work for IBM? I said, well, I was in HR. It doesn't mean I was technically competent. So I'm sorry you all missed that. But I remember talking to Steve. He became, when there was a ThinkPad and they sold off the business, it became Lenovo Computers, a Chinese company. He was their first CEO. And I remember I was his third coach in the space of a year and a half. And he said, I like you. I was like, thank God. I go, why? He goes, well, unlike all of your other colleagues who came before you, they would just ask me questions all day, and he goes, I got a mirror in my bathroom. He goes, you at least have the courage to tell me what you think. He goes, you're wrong most of the time, but at least I have something to react to. And it actually improves my thinking. So I kind of that stuck with me, that even being wrong, as long as I offer something that is, reasonably well thought out, even that can be helpful. And then as the coach, I'm in some ways learning as much from the coaching as them as hopefully they're learning from me. And I think it is a two-way relationship. So yeah.
Your process seems rather unique as a coach in that you offer different perspectives. I've had a lot of coaches on my podcast before, and it's pretty much the same kind of, like you just said, you're asking open-ended questions to try to draw out of people things, but you seem to have a unique way of getting to another level with your clients. What is that special superpower that you have when it comes to coaching?
Superpower. That's really funny. When I asked you if I could curse, I'm not sure I got a real yes. So, because I realize the joke I'm going to tell now, there's a little bit of cursing. It'll be like cursing, Reverend. Did you think Jesus ever swore?
No, I don't.
Look, he didn't even go, come on, you didn't think I could do this? Where's the trust? So, but I remember the old Mel Brooks movie, History of the World, Part 1. And he's at the unemployment line. And whatever her name is, who was on Golden Girls, she's working at the unemployment office. And, they're all dressed in Roman toga. And she asks, so what do? He goes, stand up philosopher. And she goes, oh, a bullshit artist. So wonder if my superpower is I'm comfortable trafficking in bullshit. But maybe on a more serious note, it's not like I don't think questions matter and listening matters. I really value that from people who coach me because I like relying upon myself to figure something out. And I like somebody who knows how to ask me the right questions to get my brain thinking. So I don't want to denigrate that at all. I really don't. I see the tremendous value in it. And I ask lots of questions in my coaching. I have trained my faculty to do the same. For example, today I was on, I had two steer co-members of a large, kind of well-known media company. They're on the executive committee, whatever they call it. I confuse these terms sometimes because different companies have different terms. And the first question I asked the person on the call, like we're going to work on her situation. I asked them, so, what do you want to learn? And what do you want to get out of her session today? Because how do I serve her unless I know what she would like to get from it? And then she's dealing with a difficult situation with somebody who is there was a claim of harassment made against a particular manager, and now she's got to kind of deal with this, right? So I asked her some questions about, so I understand the fact pattern, I understand what's true, I understand what she actually did and didn't do to address the situation as a leader herself. And at some point, and she already understands the drill, we're going to figure out what is it about the way you're handling it that may be preventing you from making more progress on this situation. Because I'm always asking people to bring to me situations that are unresolved or situations where they feel like they're not getting the result that they want. So of course I have to start with learning, and the main lever for learning is great questions. But when I've learned enough to form a point of view, the questions stop, right? Because if I don't tell her what I think, and if I feel like I've got to grow model her to death by simply asking questions, then inevitably I will slip into leading questions. So they're not really genuine open questions. They're questions to get her to think what I want her to think without seeming like I'm trying to do it. Right?
Right.
To create the illusion of self-discovery. I don't exist, despite my story, to bullshit people or play any games with anybody. So, and we've already set the rules of the game ahead of time. I want to hear what you think. I'm going to ask you questions. I'm also going to share with you what I think. That's how I roll. If you don't want that, I ain't your coach. And my team isn't for you. But if you do want that, we're here for you. But even then, it's like, so, okay, well, I think the problem in the conversation you had with this person is that you didn't sufficiently acknowledge how some of this wasn't their fault at all, because here's what you told me you said. And as a consequence of that, they didn't feel understood. And so they were more defensive than they otherwise would have been. But then I'm going to stop and I go, but that's just how it appears to me. What's your take on that? So I don't know if that's different than most coaches, but I know, a lot of coaches, they will kind of stop at the coaching, the questions, and not make their own thinking to the person they're coaching vulnerable to their scrutiny. And that's something I learned early on that I think makes my global faculty and and me different than maybe the traditional coaches. I don't know. What does it sound like to you?
No, it does. I think when I was taught coaching early on was we're not supposed to give our input unless we change hats. We had this whole thing about changing hats, where if I'm going to do what you just did, I got to say, okay, I'm taking off my coaching hat, and now I'm telling you my opinion thing. They were very clear about separating the lines of,
Yeah.
And we tried not to do much of what you just did. So yeah,
I know. I mean, that's what the ICF will train you in.
Right.
International Coaching Federation. And it's like, who decided you can't tell people who decided coaching cannot include telling people what you think?
Right.
Where did that come from? I mean, in no other field of endeavor where coaching is applied, do they say you can only ask people questions? You know what I mean? Again, it's not to say we shouldn't ask a lot of questions, because the goal is to make the client be able to stand on their own 2 feet. So we don't want to create a dependence on us. That is like abso-freaking-lutely. So I'm with that. That being the goal of what's behind the questioning, but I'm against the that the question is the only tool.
Yeah, the rigid rules. The rigid rules.
Too rigid, man.
Yeah.
It's like, because what you got a football coach will go, well, do you think you could have run that pattern a little crisper? It's like, really? Now I do like the idea of, okay, you saw we had an interception here. I'm not a big sports guy, and I'm like, I feel so stereotypical now, guy talking about sports to another guy, but okay, fine. But that's the point. It's like, okay, so what happened to cause this interception? Push the work back onto the team. Push the work back onto the receiver. Fine. I think that's all good, because you want to be able to figure this out without you, ideally. But if they don't see it, what, are you just going to let them stay blind?
Right.
And then what's the benefit of your brain, the little voice that's speaking through you? Like, I can't give them access to it? Now, you shouldn't give them access to it if you're like, this is the way it is. Like, hey, you totally screwed up that conversation because you didn't acknowledge that it wasn't all their fault, and as a consequence, they were defensive. Don't you see that? Yeah, if you're going to coach like an a-hole, you shouldn't do it that way.
Right.
But if you're doing it, I think, with a genuine desire to serve, and you're not trying to force your view on them, if you're still enabling them to make a choice that is theirs as an adult, which is why the question at the end is so important, and the humility that you bring to it, it's like, but that's just how it appears to me. I mean, maybe I'm wrong about that. What's your take on that? Then it's an adult to adult exchange. I don't have to treat them like they're so brittle, like little children, that they hear my view. Wow, they're going to treat it like manna from heaven. Your Lord Jehovah has given you this 10 commandments. I don't think we have to worry about that enough, as long as we're trying to make the conclusions we've come to discussable and debatable. And as long as we're open to changing our minds, and we're not trying to convince them.
I like that.
So that's my stance on it. Yeah,
no, sorry. I like that. No, because it's when I started out coaching, it's like you felt like you were on this edge of, I want to say something, but I can't. I'm trained not to, and so you sit there and you keep asking more questions to try to get them to see your way and going,
where do I go now?
It's so obvious that, don't you see this? And so you're kind of like, you're like this kid on the edge of a slide ready to jump off or something. You're like, no, I can't, but I want to. And so that's what it was like, this tug of war in coaching.
I mean, it's very frustrating. However, I could also see the value of that. Like, if you're somebody who's used to telling people what you think or what to do, the discipline of like, okay, you don't get to do that anymore. Now you can only ask questions. Right. I'm like, it's probably good for the development of our characters somehow, and it's probably good for our own evolution. But then at some point, when you've tamed the part of yourself that just wants to talk, that perhaps is too eager to help, Once you've tamed that, then it's time to bring back in you sharing more of yourself. And then you're mixing it up, provided when you share yourself, it isn't coming from it's so obvious, don't you see it?
Right.
If it's coming, that's the thing. But if it's coming from the place of, listen, it's so obvious to me, I don't know why you can't see it, but maybe I'm wrong, then that's a better foundation to come from when you're expressing yourself, I think. I mean, How does it sound to you?
No, I agree with you, and I get that. And to me, that's a freeing way to help coach someone versus the other way that I was initially trained because I'd work with people who are about to go into a meeting and blow the meeting up, and it's obvious going to blow the meeting up, but I can't tell them they're going to blow it up. And so then they come back a week later going, that didn't go well. I'm like, yeah, I kind of saw that, but I couldn't tell you that your approach might not be the most productive approach.
Because there's so first of all, the idea that our job is to help people see things for themselves. That is right. That's the ethos that's behind it. That's a worthy goal, but there's a higher goal, being helpful.
Right.
This is in service of that. So if they're going to blow something up, and also we're kind of playing God with them, right? Because if you were to ask this person, listen, I think you're going to blow up this meeting, but I've got this coaching kind of orthodoxy where I'm not supposed to tell you that, and I got to cover it up and only ask you questions. Which would you prefer? And they're going to look at you like, are you crazy? So we're playing a lot of God with people where we're deciding for them how they ought to be treated, and they're not part of it. So this is us now in the name of trying to help these people stand on their own 2 feet as adults. We're creating an adult-child relationship with them because we're not making them part of the deciding around how they're going to be coached. Now, you may get somebody who says, I never want to hear your point of view. I only want to hear questions. And let me get banged up on my own. Okay. So part of that sometimes is just good contracting.
Right.
With the client and just like, but you got to be who you are at some point, and nobody else can be you. And you being you is the way you could perhaps make a unique contribution to somebody. And ultimately, coaching is a relationship. So if you're bringing your real self to it, there ain't no relationship. And so you want to be able to work with people that can click with who you are, because that's how you're going to bring the most benefit to them. So I think having this conversation at the beginning of some type of relationship is like, how you like to coach, does that even work for them? And if it doesn't, you're probably okay to modify your approach to some degree, as long as is it too radical for you? All good.
Yeah, I like that. Because I keep thinking about the gap we've been talking about in the beginning of this conversation. This is who you are when you're under stress. This is who you could be. If I don't help you bridge that gap, then am I really helping you as a coach? When I see that under stress, you're going to do this. And in your situation where you described it, you will blow this up. But if you adjust this and become the empathetic, confident leader you have the potential to be, it'll go over much better. Let's help you figure out how to not be the person that you default to, but be the aspirational person you could become.
For sure, man. 100%.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that. 100%.
So I love that, because I think that's the coaching thing that I saw was the fault in the training I received was like, yeah, but this is not going to go well for you. It's like, it's obvious from the way you're describing it. This isn't going to go well.
There's good stuff there. It was just too narrow.
Yeah.
The stuff is still good. Probably the way you learn to ask questions, the kind of questions to ask, the insistence on being more patient, right?
Right.
I think all that's good. But at some point, even the best teachings become confining.
Yeah. This was a fascinating conversation. I wanted to get one more thing to you. No, we never got to your concept of get to candor. And I want to talk about that a little bit, because why is that crucial for effective coaching?
Because the truth is the handmaiden of the good.
Right.
I wish I came up with that. I wish I'm the one who would come up with that. It's not me. It's from Jordan Peterson. So, and you'll know a little bit about this from your religious training, right? The truth is always in service of the good.
Right.
So as coaches, we're trying to do this person as much good as humanly possible. So you do that by, I think, treating every coaching conversation with them as a collaborative search for the truth. You know, what's actually happening in the situation? How do you need to handle it? How are you handling it? All of it. And so when I talk about candor, I don't mean it as you're just telling them the truth of what you think. That's certainly a part of it. But you're equally interested in the truth of what they think. Because together we're trying to figure out what is actually true, which may not be exactly what either of us are thinking. Or in the team coaching situation, what the 12 of us are thinking, including me as a coach. So I feel like I'm kind of a guide to help people figure out what's true, and therefore on that basis, what to do in order to make things better than they are. And so the way we define candor at Holzman leadership is it's not like straight talk or courageous conversations or any of these kind of macho ideas. It's about treating every important conversation as a collaborative search for the truth in order to make things better. That's it. And it's a way of even reconstructing the purpose of conversations. Because I remember I was working with this head of sales in the UK for some division of a pharmaceutical company. And his name is Ed. And after we did all this training with his like sales reps and then his managers of the sales reps and then of I think of him as next level, and things went very well. Like their sales results improved. People were really digging the training. They really took to it, you know? And I started to try to figure out, so why did it work? And that's what he said to me. He said, you know, I used to think of these conversations with my team or with customers as like things I had to win. And then I realized, and he goes, this is what you're teaching us, to treat all these conversations as a collaborative search for the truth. And I have to say, Reverend, it put words, it just hit me hard, like everything started tingling, you know? And so I think coaching is essential to leadership, because leadership is about helping people face the truth and then to take the actions which are going to move things from current reality to some better reality. And I think coaching is the same thing in a sense. And I think, you know, anyone could be a coach and anyone can be a leader when you kind of think of it that way. Or we all have something to contribute to leadership and coaching when you think of it as it's really when you think of it as a conversation with those goals.
I love that. This is my favorite question to ask my guest, my second favorite question.
Yes, sir.
What do you want your legacy to be?
I should have an answer to that, shouldn't I? I feel like there's something deeper that I can't kind of express right now because it's not on tap for me. But I do think that one of the things is what I want to leave behind is actionable knowledge that could help people have much better conversations about the things that really matter in and outside of work. And when I say actionable knowledge, and I want to leave it to people in a way, not just knowledge that's valid, but that they can use and to make all their conversations better. And I want to do that not just through having more people who can coach this stuff and develop other people in this stuff, but ultimately I'm starting to build an AI app around that right now, because I want to give people something of very high quality, that is available to the masses, that's available to people anytime they need it, and it's cheap. Because I think if people can have better conversations about the things that really matter versus the way we normally have those conversations, maybe it moves the world, half an inch forward.
I love that. So here's another coaching question. Anything I haven't asked you that I should have asked you?
That's a great question, right? Yeah, maybe the question is like, what's next? I don't know. I'm going to keep working on this app. I'm writing the book. I'm going to keep trying to grow my faculty. I'm going to keep trying to be truthful. And when you're kind of, I guess, living that way, you never know what's going to come next, actually.
It's true.
But I'm excited to see it. That's it. And yeah, thank you very much.
Where can people find you, connect with you if they want you as a coach to learn to get to the truth about life?
Oh, God. They should talk to you about life, maybe. They could talk to me about leadership. First of all, we put together some free resources for your listeners. So if they want some free content, then they could email my PA and colleague, Lace, so LACE, at holzman.com, HOLZMAN.com. Also connect with me on LinkedIn, Todd Holzman, TODD, Holzman. I and my team post every single day, hopefully on things that are stackable and immediately useful. And then you could also check out Holzman Leadership, where we've got like tons of like free videos and little stackable leadership insights, just holzmanleadership.com.
Well, Todd, thanks so much for this amazing conversation, and I really enjoyed it. And thank you for taking the time to being on and providing such great content and a great conversation about leadership. So thank you for what you do.
Well, you're very welcome. I hope it was useful. And I don't know, something about you and the questions and your very intent listening that makes it easy. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Trailblazers and Titans. If you enjoyed our conversation and found value in the insights shared, please subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us reach more listeners and continue bringing you the stories of the world's most inspiring leaders. Don't forget to follow us on social media for updates and exclusive content. Join our community of Trailblazers and Titans, and let's continue to learn, grow, and transform our visions into reality together. Until next time, keep blazing your trail and striving for greatness.